All right, let's go on to our final two teams. Let's go to the Bears here real quick. There's not much to talk
Bears.
about with the Chicago Bears in terms of fantasy, unless you're very excited to steal Velus Jones with your last pick in your fantasy draft in 75 rounds, and with the 756th pick in the draft, you take Velus Jones in your fantasy football league. Then it's okay. Um, okay. All right. Enough of that. Enough of that nonsense. Whew.
Taking on the
Justin
fifth round.
Fields. Justin Fields last season, at times, was a QB1. His last 4 games where he finished the game, where he finished his last 4 games of the season that he played, where he finished from start to finish, he finished as a quarterback 1, a top 10 quarterback in all of those games. Can Justin Fields sneak in to the top 12 quarterbacks at the end of the season, Aaron?
I'm kind of confused at what you said. You said he was a quarterback 1 last year?
No, that's not what I said. That is not what I said at all.
Okay, what
his last 4 games of the season, where he played from start to finish, he finished as a QB1 in the top 10 of fantasy football.
Okay.
Some games he was at 5.
You know what? Look, man, I don't like that you went to Full Sail University and you were pulling these skewed stats out of your ass, because it's absolutely asinine you would even ask that question in that way. The man played 4 games the last 8 weeks of the year. And one game he left, which we don't count because he got hurt.
But we talk about it all the time. We talk about it all the damn time about how Derek Carr is not going to be. You can't see Derek Carr being a top 12 quarterback, or you can't see him getting into the top 10 because of his rushing ability, his lack of rushing ability. Yeah. Justin Fields has that rushing ability, we saw it last season where he did finish in the top 10 of quarterbacks because of that rushing ability. So it's not that insane to ask that type of question.
Yes, it's the way you worded it. First of all, it is very insane that you would say that, because you failed to mention in those 4 games that you're talking about, 2 of those games he ran for like 45 yards and 35 yards. The rushing ability didn't really do as much as we expected to. The second thing is we shouldn't be talking about Justin Fields quarterback 1 in any conversation, because we should be talking about Justin Fields. Is he fantasy relevant right now? Like, that's the question. It's not, is he a quarterback 1? Is he fantasy relevant? Is Justin Fields even worth drafting? That's the real question. In a redraft league, are you drafting Justin Fields? I'll tell you this right now. Most people aren't. As a backup, maybe. Most people are streaming him. And that's the real question. Look, upside, dynasty, future, keeper, absolutely. Justin Fields has the potential to crack the top 10, to be a fantasy asset in the top 10. In 2022, with that roster, I ain't looking for Justin Fields to be on my team. And that's a damn shame, because the ability's there. And to your point, there will be games where he rushes for 2 touchdowns, throws for 200 yards, and throws for another one, and does put up those numbers. But guess what? I'm not going to be the person that picks him up and starts him the week he throws for 42 yards, is sacked 12 times, fumbles twice, and throws 3 picks. Not happening.
I can see it now, though, when I hop in the boat with AJ for a streaming quarter. Oh, no, that's streaming defense. When we talk about streaming quarterbacks of the week during our fantasy football shows, I can see Justin Fields coming up in conversation as one of those quarterbacks that we try to stream. Sure. And that's fair. That's fair to say. AJ, with the Bears offense as a whole, you really look at 2 people that are actually going to be drafted from this. Maybe Cole Kmet gets drafted too. Shouldn't shit on him. But the 2 main people, Darnell Mooney and David Montgomery. Darnell Mooney is being drafted right now as the wide receiver 25. David Montgomery is now being drafted as the running back 15. What is the overall comfort level in drafting those 2 guys at their ADP, knowing what this Chicago Bears offense has looked like in the past?
Comfort is a tough word. I feel like that's a very strong word, the trust level there. But the thing you can bank on is, if you ended up drafting these guys, is the workload. You know David Montgomery is going to get run. But even with that being said, let's see, he finished as the running back 19 last year. He had that great year the year before where he finished as the running back 4. And then the year before that, I want to say he was the running back 24. So you're getting RB2 session, but like there's people around him that I think I would rather. I think that Elijah Mitchell's going after him. We talked about A.J. Dillon, who I think I might take the upside of and expecting him to have a great year. Darnell Mooney is going to get the targets. I'm excited about the possibility of Darnell Mooney. I mean, he had 140 targets last season. So you think that comes down a little bit maybe? If we're talking 115, 120, he can still be efficient with that. He's a real deep threat. He's a speedster. But if he's the only person you're worried about stopping, is he going to be able to be effective? So I don't know if the word comfort is there. At pick 30 for David Montgomery, I might try to go with some more upside. In other years where there's more options, you were a little bit more expecting of a better offense, I might have taken it. This year, I might look for another guy. Darnell Mooney, because he's a wide receiver 1, and he's still going at our wide receiver 3, technically the first wide receiver 3 at this point in time. I think he'd also have to fall to me. I just think there's other guys that I would rather take a stab on than go with the consistency level of what we were hoping from what we saw last season and with David Montgomery the season before. So
see, it's funny.
I mean, that's just personal, I guess. So
yeah, no, I'm honestly on board with that, and then that's something where it's like this. It's hard to draft those players that are on such bad offenses, but with David Montgomery, it's the workload that he's going to get. That's the thing that makes me a little bit more comfortable. If I had to choose between whether or not I'm more comfortable with Darnell Mooney or whether or not I'm more comfortable with David Montgomery and selecting them in the draft, if I could only have one of them, I'd much rather take David Montgomery at his ADP than a Darnell Mooney, even though Darnell Mooney, like you said, is being drafted as a wide receiver 3 right now, high end, the highest of wide receiver 3s right now. I still would rather David Montgomery because you know he's going to get the workload. Like that is there. The targets for Darnell Mooney are going to be there, but if Justin Fields can't even get the ball off or can't even make the throw, it's not going to matter if he's targeting Darnell Mooney or not because it's not going to get there or it's going to be picked off on the way there or whatever. David Montgomery is going to be carrying the rock for Chicago. Bad offensive line or not, you said last year he finished top 20 as a top 20 running back last year. I think that's right around where what you're going to get out of David Montgomery. Aaron, are you there or are you?
I really want to answer this question.
Yes, you're there. You're good.
Okay.
We can hear you.
Darnell Mooney, whatever. I don't care about him. David Montgomery, give me all the shares. Every share of David Montgomery I can get. Give them to me. You mentioned volume. It's really about the volume. There was a stretch last year, I think like the last 5 or 6 weeks of the year, maybe even last 7 weeks of the year, 9 targets, 7 targets, 6 targets, 6 targets, 7 targets, 5 targets, like just insane volume in the pass game, in the run game. Give me all the David Montgomery. He missed 4 games last year and was still RB19. I think his floor is an RB2, mid RB2 like last year. Health-wise, he's easily take him as your RB2 and feel very, very, very good about it.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I think I'm just more worried this season than I've ever been for them. Like, because you're absolutely right, and I'm put it this way: I'm deciding with all of that knowledge to take a stab somewhere else, just because I don't know that it'll work in my favor this season. And I've had David Montgomery on most of my teams for the last 3 years, and yes, it has worked well for me. There's just sometimes where it's just like you have to sit there on your draft board and make that choice. And I think where I'm sitting right now until I see something that gives me back that hope, maybe this preseason, the offense looks way better and way more efficient than we ever thought it could be. And maybe then I'm like, all right, maybe I'll just, maybe 1 share and we'll see what happens. And then I'll trade for him later. But I think I'm just more worried this season than I was last year or the year before. On a David Montgomery. Like, even if he said running back 18, I'd probably be like, yeah. I mean, I grab him right there. Like, it's 3 spots, but I mean, that could be the 2 or 3 players that before that could be the difference in, me making the playoffs or me missing the playoffs.
Yeah. And the players going around David Montgomery, it's It's funny. We all, I think, if I remember correctly, in our tiers show, we had David Montgomery ranked and agreed on David Montgomery being an RB2. He's being drafted ahead of James Conner, who we did have as an RB1 on our tiers show. So he's being drafted literally one spot ahead of James Conner. So that's one player that I think I'd rather have. Man, James Conner in that offense it can be good too. It's tough. It's tough to gauge this Bears fantasy outlook because of how bad this team could potentially be. Watch them be a surprise, and Velus Jones finishes as a wide receiver too. We're talking about him on a waiver wire show or something like that during the regular season.